Good morning, everyone. This is day two of our rather unusual experience of having to communicate in completely different ways from normal as a church community. So we're going to try and regularly send out messages and videos and just keep in contact in different ways. And this morning, obviously, we're now all dealing with the latest situation, which is that for the majority of school children, they will not be attending. This is going to put an extra burden onto parents and families. But also, there will be many teachers still having to go in to take care of the small number of pupils that will be attending. And we pray for everyone who's affected by the latest change in the situation. Just a reminder again that for the foreseeable future, we won't be having church services, all the normal activities that we would have had, such as a community lunch today, will not be happening. Communion not be happening today, nor will there be services on Sunday or for the next few weeks. But we will keep you posted on any developments, any changes. And we are putting together a pastoral action plan to make sure that those in our community who are a bit more vulnerable and isolated are cared for, even if it's just by way of making a phone call every couple of days and checking that they've got the right amount of supplies indoors. We're also going to be opening up the church for some prayer times, putting a team together hopefully today, and we'll be able to publish some information about exactly when the church will be open for people just to come and sit quietly in the church to pray, obviously bearing in mind that we are meant to be keeping distance from each other, so 2 or 3 meters away from each other. I think thankfully we've got quite a big church building, so there's room for quite a few people to come in and sit in different parts of the church and pray. Now, this is a very uncertain time, and we're in new territory. And it reminds me very much of a passage that I was looking at early on Sunday morning, and this is before all these major changes took place, but it seemed very relevant. It's also a passage that Patrick Regan used when he came to preach back in January, and it's from Jeremiah chapter 29. You might want to turn to that. I can't give you a page number because we haven't got the Bibles that we're using in church, but Jeremiah chapter 29, it's about halfway through the Bible, and it's in the Old Testament. And there are some verses I'm going to read first, which we often turn to when we're looking for some sort of reassurance. But the verses I'm going to read are preceded by some other very important verses that put the whole thing into context. So the verse that we normally look at, or the verses from Jeremiah 29, go like this. For I know the plans I have for you, this is verse 11, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. Then you will call upon me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. I will be found by you, declares the Lord, and will bring you back from captivity. Now, we're quite familiar with the first part of those verses about God giving us a hope and a future. It's great. We want to know that personally and as a church community and as a nation. But actually the context of this is that the Jewish people have been taken out of their comfort zone. They've been taken into captivity. They are in exile. And that the context for that appears in the verses before that. But Eugene Peterson writes about this. He's written a very helpful book about Jeremiah. And Eugene Peterson says, Israel was taken into exile in 587 BC. The people were uprooted from the place in which they were born. The land that had been promised to them, which they had possessed, in which their identity as a people of God had been formed, was gone. They were forced to travel across the Middle Eastern desert 700 miles, leaving home, temple and hills. In the new land, Babylon, customs were strange, the language incomprehensible, and the landscape oddly flat and featureless. Everything was different. And actually we do live in an unfamiliar place now. We've never been this way before. Many of the things that we were certain about are now up in the air, they're quite uncertain, and we don't know what's going to be happening over the next few weeks and months. In many ways, we have been taken into exile. And Eugene Peterson goes on to say, these experiences of exile, minor and major, continue through changes in society, changes in government, changes in values, changes in our bodies and emotions. We barely get used to one set of circumstances and faces when we are forced to deal with another. Actually, life can often be uncertain anyway. We tend to be very dependent upon our consumer and material possessions. We think very often in our Western society that we can buy our way out of anything, but we know that's not the case. We know that circumstances can change, health can change, our finances can change, relationships can change. So what does Jeremiah say? What does the Lord say through Jeremiah the prophet to these people who are taken into exile? Well, a few verses before the ones that I read earlier, in Jeremiah 29, this is what we find in verse 4. This is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says to all those I carried into exile. Build houses and settle down. Plant gardens and eat what they produce. Marry and have sons and daughters. Find wives for your sons and give your daughters in marriage, so that they too may have sons and daughters. Increase in number, do not decrease. Also, seek the peace and prosperity of the city to which I have carried you into exile. Pray to the Lord for it, because if it prospers, you too will prosper. In other words, don't sit around moping and complaining and looking at your watch thinking, when is this going to end? Jeremiah was saying to the people that God says, look, this is the new normal. This is option B. This is the situation that you are in. Get used to it. But not just get used to it, learn to prosper in it. Because if you can pray and support the community around you, he says, build houses, settle down, plant gardens. Now that's an interesting one. Apparently the sales in garden centres have gone way up in the last week or two, because I guess as we come into spring, and it's wonderful that we're coming into spring and not into winter, as we come into spring, we may want to spend some time outside. If you're lucky enough to have a garden, then perhaps spend some time in the garden. Get out, or if you're not able to do that, get out in the countryside. If you're able to get out at all, get out and enjoy some of the spring flowers. You know, I rang somebody the other day. I had to make an important phone call, and I said to her, is this a good time to talk? And she said, yes. Well, I've just stopped the car with my children, and we've just seen some daffodils, and we're just looking at how beautiful they are. And I was really taken with that, because we do, in our normal busy life, spend so much time rushing around from one job to the next that we don't take time to stop and be still and be quiet and enjoy nature around us. And I think if we can try to get used to this new normal, and that may be a new normal every day, and ask God to bless us and use us to bless the people around us, then, as Jeremiah says, pray to the Lord for this, because if you can prosper the people around you, you too will prosper. If we can find ways to bless people around us and to do some acts of kindness to ourselves as well as to other people, actually, if we have a little bit more time on our hands, just to be kind to ourselves, to be still, to go and look at the daffodils and to enjoy the beautiful creation that God has given to us. So let's be thankful today. Let's be mindful that God has got plans for us, that he wants to prosper us and not to harm us. He's plans to give us a hope and a future. But for now, the new normal in our time of exile is a time to ask God to use it as an opportunity to be blessed and to bless others. Have a good day, and we'll meet up again soon.